Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from today. Thank you, Beth and Allison, particularly for joining us. We're so happy to have you with us here today. Let me share my screen with some slides whilst we're waiting for everyone to join. So whilst we're waiting for everyone to start in the webinar, do please introduce yourself in the chat, say which organization you're from and where in the world you are from today, as I am dialing in from very sunny Oxford in the UK. And I know we have people from many different countries joining us this morning or afternoon. So do let us know where you are. And we will probably get cracking very soon, as we have such a lot of things we would like to cover today. And we have, again, two amazing guests who I want to make sure they have lots of time to speak, and it's not me. So it's 4:02 in my local time. So I think we will... let me just share my screen properly with video and share sound.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like, it looks like a few folks are saying the chat's disabled. So we should just use the Q&A.
Yes. Okay. Good. That is something we will check in on as well. Okay, so we will work on that, and I will do a very quick introduction. So hello everyone, I'm Jonathan. I'm the Managing Director of Lightful Learning. It's a real pleasure to be here today with our two very special guests. I oversee our learning programs here at Lightful, and have been a big fan of our two guests for many, many years. And really what we're going to talk about today is three things. I'm going to set a little bit of context, give us an introduction to what we're going to be talking about today, and leave lots of time for us to have a chat with Beth and with Allison, and for you to ask your questions to them as well. So I will just get cracking with our first poll, just to get a sense of how everyone is well, first, are you a robot? It's very important to ascertain at this point in time, as we're doing a session on AI, but also get a sense of your use of AI tools and your confidence relative to using those tools, which will help us kind of understand what good questions to ask. So as you're answering those questions, it's important to start with some definitions. So the first definition I'm using is from Beth and Allison's book, which you can see in the top left corner of Beth's screen, The Smart Nonprofit. So we're going to be talking about smart tech, which here is the universe of technologies that includes artificial intelligence and its subsets and cousins, such as machine learning and natural language process that make decisions for people. So we've got smart tech, and then we'll also be talking about, so generative AI specifically is the use of an AI tool to create content in different forms based on prompts. So that can be text, images, audio, and video. And obviously the first, most kind of important thing we're talking about text generation is ChatGPT, which was only launched in November. So end that first poll and share the results. So, 6% of you are robots. So that's interesting to know. And most of you, over 80% have used ChatGPT or other AI tools, which is interesting. And in terms of confidence, mostly 2s out of 5 there. Very few people feeling extremely confident, and quite a lot of 0%, a few 0%. So, and that is perhaps not surprising, given that everything is quite so new here. And, one of the data points that people use a lot about this is that ChatGPT managed to reach 100 million monthly users. It's so many I can't even say it, in just 2 months. So this was a massive, massive increase from a standing start, way bigger than some of the other big social networks we all know very well. And so this is like a significant technology shift, and we should acknowledge this. And Beth and Allison might remember this particular photo from presentations 10 years ago on digital. And so this was an example of when the new Pope was announced in 2005 and 2013. You'll notice in 2005, no one had, like, there's one cell phone. In 2013, everyone has phones and tablets. So this was a kind of cliched image to demonstrate the big shift from like non-mobile to mobile. And this is an equivalent shift. And so we should acknowledge that this is really big deal. So I tried to predict what this shift means, might mean in 2033 for the equivalent of like if there was a new Pope. Now, probably won't be like this in 2033 with an army of kind of androids taking photos. But this is the sort of, I don't know, doom-mongering or kind of scare tactics people are talking about AI. So it's important to have this conversation with two experts who actually know what they're talking about. And also, it's important to recognize that AI is coming to a software near you. So Microsoft is integrating it into all of their, Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Google will be adding it to Google Docs, to Google Slides, and Microsoft is also adding it to Windows. So AI, this sort of whole generative AI thing is not just limited to ChatGPT and using that in isolation. It's coming across so many of the products and services we all use in the nonprofit sector kind of every day to do our jobs. So to set some context, again, I'll do some quick demos just to give you a sense of some of the things that we have been looking at Lightful. So the first, very quickly, is to show you a new feature we have released, in fact, just on Monday, which helps use AI to give some feedback on some content you might create for your social platform. So here I'm creating a post for Lightful's Twitter account. This is the content. If I wanted feedback, I click this AI feedback button. And what we've done here is built a kind of prompt in the background that takes the content you have written into your prompt, runs that through GPT, through a prompt that we have tried, we have tested in lots of different ways to find the best prompt to give you some useful feedback on your post. Now, it can take a few seconds because there's a lot of demand on the AI services, but you can see here, we have 3 suggestions that come back. So the first one, use a compelling call to action, and then gives you a kind of an example. And so all of these come back with some useful advice you could then use to make your post better. And then we also give the opportunity to give some feedback because we want to make sure that humans have an ability to tell us like whether these are actually good or not and help us refine our products. But no, what we're not doing is creating content from the fly, from nothing. We're trying to give feedback and help empower people. So the second thing, I'm going to show you a quick video. Just let me pass over to my AI assistant for a minute.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hello, Beth, Allison, and everyone else on the Zoom. I am an AI-generated video. Can you tell? How do you feel when you hear and see this? Do you think you would use a video like this in your own comms? Share your thoughts in the Zoom chat. Don't worry about hurting my feelings if you don't like this. I am not real, so have no feelings to hurt. Thanks and goodbye.
So there's an example of some kind of AI generated content. And the last thing is something quickly I only found today. It is a kind of chatbot that...
Certainly. I'm an AI language model designed to assist with various tasks such as answering questions, generating text, and providing information.
So this is a bot that's apparently been trained on my voice to sound like me. Now, does it sound like me? I'll let you be the judge. It's kind of a bit more kind of mid-Atlantic than perhaps I sound. But I think I wanted to give you that sense of, these are some of the things that you can do that are now possible that were not possible in the past. And so before I kind of jump to go back to ask Allison and Beth some questions, I wanted to get this sort of sense of, how do you feel when you see those things? And what are your thoughts around kind of AI in general? And that will inform, I think, some of the questions that I will ask to Beth and Allison. So that is a very quick kind of introduction and some context setting for what we're going to talk about this morning and this afternoon, depending on where you are. So again, while I just leave that poll to run, a little bit on our 2 panelists. So it was a real honor to have Allison and Beth here today. you can scan this AI-generated QR code to download or to get a link to buy their book, which is The Smart Nonprofit, Staying Human-Centered in an Automated World. And I have just read this, and it's really interesting, very practical guide to all kind of aspects of AI, not just generative. You will also note that Allison and Beth wrote this book. It came out last year, so it predates ChatGPT. So they were talking about these things before it became fashionable and cool for everyone to be an AI expert. And so that's why we have them on for today. So I will end that poll and then share the results. And let's use that as some context for talking to Beth and Allison. So to the first question, so 69% of people are unsure if it's right. So certainly kind of more than not. And 92% concerned about the ethical considerations of using AI. It's very, very kind of high there. And then in terms of how AI makes you feel, okay, I will find some of those words later and share them as well. So with that context in mind, Allison, I will kind of come to you first with a question. So what does then, is perhaps quite a broad one, what does this all mean, AI for the nonprofit sector? Like, first thing, can we ignore it? Do we have to pay attention?
We absolutely have to pay attention, Jonathan, because if nothing else has become clear this year with ChatGPT, it is how fast and how powerful these tools are. They are coming into your organization, whether you like it or not. They're going to be embedded in software products. They're going to be part of any external tech that you're using. Your staff are going to be using ChatGPT, whether you've put parameters around it, whether you've talked about how to use it well. It's in the ethos in the same way that social media was 12 years ago. But, and Jonathan, this is the key point for our conversation today. This is not more of the same digital tech that we've seen over the years. What makes AI and generative AI so different is that it is bots doing tasks and functions that only people could do until now. So that is both an existential crisis for us as human beings, showing your bot talking somewhat like you, but more in my accent than yours. And an enormous leadership challenge for organizations to get their arms around this, to use it ethically, responsibly, strategically, smartly, and well. And everybody who is feeling uncomfortable, unsure, scared is just right to feel all of those things right now, Jonathan. I would be worried about anybody who wasn't feeling all of those things. And yet we still need to head first into this new chapter with AI.
Great, thank you, Allison. Would you agree, Beth? What's your take on that?
Yes, 100%. And Allison laid that out so well. I think I would add to it from my perspective of also working on workplace well-being, that it's also a way that we can rehumanize work. It's been really bad over the last couple of years due to the pandemic. High levels of stress, high levels of burnout, and this technology offers us, even though we're scared of it, offers us this great opportunity to rehumanize work, because it can take over some of the grunt work, but even become our assistants. Nonprofits have always said we don't have enough capacity to hire the administrative help to help us do our work. So this can allow us a way to step out of this busyness trap and allow us to really do the work that we came into the sector to do, which will lead to more impact.
Yes, that's great. I think the phrase you use in your book is the dividend of time, right? And you say the time that is freed up for people and organizations as smart tech takes over hours of time-consuming rote tasks. So, Allison, what are some of those tasks that you feel are going to be, smart tech can automate that we used to have to do before?
So just to be really clear, the dividend of time, which is what we think as the ultimate ROI for using AI, will only be available to the organizations that change the way they work, change the way they think about work, Jonathan, because if you just continue to try to do more and more and more, as Beth was just saying, right? You're just going to continue to burn out people. You're just going to be really transactional with donors. So the dividend time is about creating what we call the sweet spot of co-botting, right? Where the tech does what it does really well, and the peoples do what people do really well, which is build relationships, build communities, problem solve. So when AI is doing rote tasks, it will do things like automatically reconcile your budget. So no more panicked week before the board meeting trying to reconcile all of the finances. All of that's going to be done in real time. It's going to smooth out workflow and make it much easier to find information and intelligence within organizations. Where have we decided this before, right? What is our history of working on these kinds of issues? It's going to do the first cut of communications like ChatGPT is starting to do, save people an enormous amount of time. It's going to do donor prospecting in a nanosecond. It's going to answer questions, rote questions that people have. Jonathan, we like to talk about exquisite pain points that organizations have, right? Those really painful bottlenecks that stop other things from happening. And if you're working in, say, a social service agency, I can guarantee one of your exquisite pain points is getting asked the same question every day by email and by phone. What time do you open? Is my contribution tax deductible? What is the lineup of classes coming up? Chatbots can do all of that work if they're programmed and tested carefully and well.
Yeah, and that is a big if.
That is a huge if. That's why we're here today. That's the if.
That's the if.
So Beth, leading question, can you give an example of when that if has not been done well and what the results of that are?
Sure. And let me say this, that there's many examples. And when we were researching for the book, we found them where bots have gone wild and bots have gone wrong and caused harm and also embarrassment to the company that was deploying them. But the most recent one in the nonprofit sector was kind of, Allison and Mai's worst to nightmare scenario. And here it is, just a few months into ChatGPT release. And many of you may be familiar with this because it did get a lot of press. The National Eating Disorders Association, NEDA, it's the largest organization dedicated to supporting individuals and families who are impacted by eating disorders. And its hotline has been around for about 20 years and has dispensed advice, always connected to a human. And it's helped hundreds and thousands of people. But of course, COVID pandemic created the perfect storm for eating disorders because people were isolated, alone, and that includes increase in that problem. So their employees who run the hotline, I believe there were about 4 plus over 200 volunteers, could barely keep up with the response. And their leadership kind of said, okay, we're going to put a chatbot, Tessa. It's AI-driven chatbot. We're going to put this on the front line, and it promptly handed out pink slips to hotline staff. And in addition to this, not only did they weren't human-centered in this and kind of thought about the technology as a cheap replacement for staff. Don't do that out there if you're listening. They did quite thoroughly test the bot, and they didn't really understand what it could and couldn't do. And in a controlled environment with a lot of human feedback and supervision. And the chatbot was beginning to dispense harmful advice to people with eating disorders. So the lessons learned, I think we can take some lessons from this. First, replacing people in this way is just really dreadful. It's awful on multiple levels. Again, I'm going to say this over and over again. It's not a cheap replacement for staff, right? I know we're all under budget constraints, but robots aren't people yet. Okay, they don't, especially in this context, they can't replace counselors. They don't have human empathy. They can't act on their own. And And rushing to implement without really considering the worst possible scenario and proper testing is going to get you into trouble real fast. So that's why, as Allison mentioned before, in social media, we're kind of saying, go run in, test the waters, try it, fail fast. We really need to begin with our values and our ethics first and take a pledge to do no harm.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. I will share a link to your blog that you wrote about that, which was this idea of starting with do no harm, right? And so, Allison, can you expand on that and that do no harm? Like how do you enact that when you're trying to do it from your nonprofit?
So first, don't be a dumbass. I'm from New York. I have no patience with this, Jonathan. The do no harm begins with actually digging in and learning about the technology. And Beth and I are very, very adamant, Jonathan, that this is a leadership challenge, not a technology challenge. The C-suite has to get fully engaged in understanding what the technology is, what it can do, and that it is not an easy headcount cutter, right? Which is, Beth and I have seen this over and again, right? We can see EDs budgetary wheels turning in their heads as they think, oh, I can get rid of staff now. No, you can't, right? You so desperately need people doing people things. So step one is you need to understand what this technology is, what it does, and how and where it could go off the rails. Step two, you need to be deeply human-centered as you enter into this conversation, Jonathan. Being human-centered means always ensuring that people are in charge, that people are treated well internally and externally, right? So internally would be if you're grabbing tasks away from staff and reshaping jobs without any engagement with staff, it is not going to go well. These are human beings. Externally, when people are used to talking to human beings and now you have them talking to a bot without any introduction, without any easy way to get to a human, right? So people always need to be in charge of the bots and always need to be accessible internally and externally. And then you need to make sure that the bots do just bot things. And right now, as Beth mentioned a little while ago, that's doing rote tasks, the things that go on over and over again that are easily routinized and that aren't expected to be empathetic or problem solving or relationship building. So those are the starting points for organizations.
I think I'd add one more to Allison's really great points. I think, there's been a lot of mainstream attention on the adoption of ChatGPT and a lot of headlines about replacing all our jobs. So this might be creating some anxiety on your staff. And I think the senior leadership's, step right there is to really anticipate and mitigate those fears by being transparent about plans to use it. And maybe even, and taking a pledge around not replacing people with bots and being very, explicit about that. I think that's really important.
So right, step really carefully, Jonathan. You're talking about people's lives, their livelihoods on the inside, people's lives on the outside. This isn't a toy, right? These are really, really powerful tools that only places like NASA had access to until exactly right now. So we need senior leadership to step smartly and very carefully right now.
And I'd also add to that this technology, as we've been saying, is different. And another way that it's different, it's going to have a greater impact on organizational strategy overall, fundraising, marketing. I'm starting to see a lot come out about how shifts in strategy because of AI, but also internally, and knowing that many roles or jobs are going to shift. We have to be prepared to upskill people to take on more cognitively challenging challenging tasks, and to be able to prepare them to work in tandem with the AI. So it's not about technical training, or right now prompt engineering, how you ask ChatGPT the right questions, but really focusing on what our human skills are, right? And encouraging development and also learning and being more agile. A lot of these are the skills that we're really going to need to really be successful and get more impact in our work as nonprofits.
Yeah, I think that those are really, really great points. And music to my ears around learning. I mean, that's the whole reason we exist at Lightful, is to help people learn these digital tools. And generative AI is one of many digital tools, so it's important. And I think, again, you've talked about co-botting and the kind of human working with an AI. And again, I think one of the quotes from your book that I liked was someone saying that AI won't replace radiologists, but radiologists who use AI will replace radiologists who don't. And I think you can kind of say that humans who use AI will be more effective than people who don't. But the people need to be a kind of key part of that, as you say. So, and it's interesting how you say it's a leadership challenge. And to go back to one of those questions around ethics, do you believe, so Allison, I'll ask you this first. So do you think nonprofits need an AI policy? If so, what does that include? And then how do they get their senior leadership bought into what that policy would be?
So yes, every organization is going to need ethical and responsible use policies for AI. They're going to include how to be transparent when you're using a bot. So for instance, a person externally should know that they're talking to a bot and not a person. There have to be steps in place, as Beth was talking about, parameters in place about where and how we're using AI, and to ensure that it's always being overseen by a human. Bias is a huge issue, Jonathan, right? That these tools are being programmed by people who are generally white men, and then tested on enormous data sets, because that's what AI does. It's looking through Library of Congress sized data sets to look for patterns. Those historic data sets are generally biased against people of color and women. And that's how you end up grabbing off the shelf an HR tool to do the first pass at resumes that are going to leave out people of color and women, right? Because it was programmed that way and then tested that way. So it's your responsibility as an organization to ask the right questions about what bias is built into these systems, how can you mitigate them, and how will you continue to test that you're not being biased by using them, right? By bringing in bias into your organization, which is just remarkable given how hard we're working on this issue. So we have a chapter in the book on ethical use. And again, we need everybody to understand that it is the time right now to think deeply, not only about the technology, Jonathan, but about your work itself, not just continuing on the hamster wheel of being very task-driven, but to think about what exactly are we trying to do here in human terms? Who are we trying to affect? How do we want staff to feel? What kind of culture do we want to be? And to make sure AI is supporting that work, not destroying it.
Yeah, I think that, again, that's an interesting point, that it's like AI in lots of different areas. There's not this like, oh, we'll just plug AI in as like
it is not plug and play, it is not word processing software. People need to understand this is fundamentally different than anything we've seen in an organizational context before. And so that's why this first step of deep understanding is so important.
That's a good point. So Beth, how did you get your deep understanding in this area? How do people upskill themselves? I mean, apart from obviously coming to informative webinars like this one today, what else can we all be doing?
Well, I talk a lot about generative AI literacy, or AI literacy, and it's putting your hands on it. And I don't mean rushing to implement an organizational project. I mean your own kind of learning on it. And, and I'm not also suggesting that we all need to learn how to code, but we need to understand what code is and be able to ask good questions around the technology. Because I think one of the greatest risks is going to be coming from third-party applications because it is going to be embedded. So we really need to understand it. We don't need to learn how to code, okay? But we need to understand how it works and where bias may come in, where there are privacy issues, all of that stuff. So I'm doing a lot of reading around that. I'm taking classes. I am also carving out time to test ChatGPT and Dolly AI and some of the others like you have to experiment and directly learn the value and the drawbacks. I'm a hands-on learner, but I'm not unleashing it on anybody right now. And I think we all should be doing that. So for example, like I started some experiments with ChatGPT in my own work, in writing and also in analytical work. And so just little tests like, okay, so can this help me reduce word count for an article or blog post, or when I'm filling out an application? I found it extremely helpful, but I didn't just cut and paste the output in. I always considered it a first draft, and I actually compared it to what I had written, and maybe I'd pick and choose certain, I used it more as a brainstorming tool to help me figure out how to cut it down. And that saved me an enormous amount of time. It's also been really helpful to summarize open-ended comments from surveys and feedback forums. Although I did read through the direct quotes and think about what themes I thought as a human brain were coming up. And I compared it against the output. And I found a few things that were incorrect. I did, when we were writing the article for Candid, I went back to our book, and we had written a number of descriptions of bots gone wild, as I'd like to call them, but I was curious, were there any others before this? So I asked GPT chat, and it gave me 5 examples, and 3 of them were made up. Because I fact checked them. So you really have to fact check, okay? And then the other thing I learned too is that that it's just not one question. You have to learn how to iterate and look at the responses and figure out the next question. And you have to be really, really specific. So I'll give you an example. Recently, I was doing a training, and it's and the host is doing a language justice piece. So it was a bilingual workshop. So I had live interpreters interpreting my presentation into Spanish simultaneously while I was presenting it. And if any of you have worked in multiple languages, when you speak English, it has to be very simple. So I fed it my talking points, and I asked it to condense them and put them into simple English. And it gave me back a lot of idiomatic phrases that you don't use because they don't translate. So you really have to test it and understand, where its failures are, right? And where you can mitigate those. And on a skill base, if you're trying to encourage staff to use this, let's say in development, for example, that, it's how you craft the prop, how you iterate on the responses you get, the fact checking and whether or not you're being specific or whether it's biased. And then I think there's a third thing, at least organizationally, we then have to learn to have peer learning within to share what we're learning about it and not all working on it, stealthily, right? And start to develop, our playbooks. Once, of course, all the ethics have been discussed.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think to give an illustration of how we've done that at Lightful, we've created our own little AI squad. We have a team of people from different areas of the business, designers, engineers, digital coaches who deliver our program. And we've been exploring different areas of, how AI could help with some of the program delivery that we do. And also, so the first thing is, we came up with some guidelines of, we want to make sure there's always a human in the loop. We approach AI from a perspective of equity. We want to level the playing field and enable anyone to have these sort of superpowers. And so we've been kind of having these meetings every day over the last 4 to 5 weeks with these people. I'm working on ideas, going off, kind of testing prompts and coming back. And we've provided an immense amount of learning we've managed to kind of share internally. And some of the things that have come up that relate to your points around the diversity and equity in particular, we've been testing ways to draft personas or like see, can you draft personas based on this information or that information, trying lots of varieties of information. And it's amazing how many times ChatGPT has come up and said, here's a persona called John, or here's a persona called Sarah. Like given lots of different inputs, it always comes up almost always with the same two names. And so like that, and that's obviously not a very diverse collection of names. And I think if you just do one kind of question and then you take the response and you think that's pretty good, but if you tried that same question lots of different times with lots of slightly different information, sometimes it comes back with the same sort of stuff. So I guess, Allison, question to you, how, like, what has been your experience of testing and learning? We've heard how Beth has been trying out things. Like, what are are there some very specific tasks you now use AI to do in your day-to-day role?
So I'm definitely using AI when I get stuck in writing, Jonathan. I write a lot, right? And I'll give you a specific example. I've had my own bio for years, right? And I've never really loved it. And so I put it through ChatGPT, several iterations, had to learn what to ask of it. And now I think it's kind of awesome, and I'll send it out to you afterwards. But it's the kind of writing that can be difficult for a person to do themselves. So if you're stuck on something, it's a great jump starter for that. If you're having trouble integrating different kinds of content, it can really help with that. But I think anybody who has tried it has seen how dreadfully wrong it can be. You know, when I first just asked it for a bio of me, what I got was half me, half Beth. And I don't know if you noticed, but we're not actually the same person. So, you know, people who are going to try it once, Jonathan, and find that it's off or it got something wrong and, oh, you know, that's not worth my time. We're going to need to be more resilient than that. And we're at the very, very beginning of integrating AI into our work and private lives this way. And the tech isn't going to be perfect, even though it's unbelievably powerful. And we are all going to be developing at the same time together.
That's great. Yeah, so okay, we've got some questions in from the attendees. So I have still loads to ask, but I'll switch to some. So one from Tanya, and Beth, this is to you. So Tanya asked, what are the first steps for introducing AI at an organization and getting that leadership buy-in?
That's a really great question. I think it's one that Alice and I have thought about deeply, around every technology that nonprofits have, been, presented over the last couple of years and decades. And I think it goes back to what we've sort of said before. I think that you need to begin talking about it, reading, become educated, maybe start sharing, what I just saw today, for example, it just posted on LinkedIn. I'm seeing more and more nonprofit associations issuing ethical and responsible use statements. I just saw one this morning from the grant professionals community. We've seen NetHope issue a statement. So maybe your association is starting to generate a statement like that, maybe bringing that to the attention of your senior leadership, and maybe spending some time on the staff meetings that you're having, talking about it, or maybe a staff retreat, or maybe doing a deep dive, but starting that education that, this is something we need to pay attention to, and it's something we need to learn about. So it should be put on the learning agenda first. And maybe, sharing some of the reasons that we've talked about. I love this quote: if we don't get our hands around AI, it's going to get its hands around us. So, and I don't usually like this kind of narrative, but those that are adopting it ethically and responsibly are going to have an advantage in the future, because they're going to be able to adapt strategies. They're going to be more agile. So we need to, begin to explore this, right? And really understand it. And then, as we've talked before, it's starting to calm the anxieties, really thinking about what our organization's values are and how that applies to, ethical and responsible use. And then when we get to actually figuring out like, what is that exquisite pain point? And where do we want to start, an experiment with a lot of guardrails and a lot of thought?
Yeah. Yeah. Jonathan, if I could interject, we should talk about fundraising a little bit because it's always on people's minds. If you don't mind, I'll ask myself a question.
Sure. Well, there is also a question related to that, like how we attribute to AI. Is it required in our fundraising letters, newsletters? So yes, by all means, AI and fundraising, over to you.
So I joined Everyorg as president late last year. We're a nonprofit. We have an amazing platform for fundraising. We accept any kind of payment method. We're DAF. We turn it into dollars and donors and send it to organizations. In addition, though, Jonathan, the reason why I joined was to fix what Beth and I have been calling the leaky bucket problem, right? And this is organizations for years, the conventional wisdom is spend and lose a lot of money on acquisition, right? You get your $100 in the bucket, but don't worry that you lost money because you'll make up in the out years when those donors continue to give. And the reality is, by the time you get to year 2, there are fewer than a quarter of those donors left to give, right? And in response, in a panic, organizations do it over again. And this cycle of transactional fundraising is dreadful for organizations. They're in a constant state of panic. And as Beth mentioned early on, the burnout rate for development people is sky high. But on the other side of the equation, Jonathan, what we don't talk about enough is how dreadful it feels to donors, right? To be treated like ATM machines. Just yesterday, I saw an article saying the number of individual donors has dropped significantly. We already knew it had dropped by 20% since the beginning of this century. 20% fewer people give to a cause than they did 23 years ago, right? So the reason why I came to Every.org is let's use AI to pivot from being transactionally focused to being relationally focused in fundraising. And to do that, one, you got to take the steam out of the pot of the administrative overload in these organizations, particularly the smaller ones, right? And we've talked so far about various ways that AI can reduce the burden on organizations in workflow, in finance, in communications, and so on. And then we can use AI to customize messages to donors at every level, right? So it's not just the $1,000 and above donor that's getting a communication that feels personal to them. It's everybody, and not just personal in Dear Jonathan, but personal, Jonathan, in we know that you like these kinds of stories. We know you've clicked on them before. We know you've given to these kinds of things. And something I'm really, really excited about, let's connect donors geographically in the same area who are passionate about the same issues, right? Now we're talking about community building, we're talking about network building, all sorts of interesting things. The only way this is going to happen, Jonathan, is if organizations get themselves off the hamster wheel of transactional fundraising. That is the huge challenge, because all of the conventional wisdom and all of the pressure is to do more faster with fundraising, right? And you can do that, but you're going to have a new development director every 18 months, right? And you're going to have fewer and fewer people who want to give again to your organization. So we could use this opportunity to create a new chapter in fundraising, one that's deeply relational, one that feels better to both staff and to donors, one that is more human in so many ways. That, to me, is the opportunity to create a 21st century model of fundraising that leaves behind all of that conventional wisdom, all of those bad habits from the previous century. That gets me really excited. And everybody here today should take a look at Every.org.
Thank you, Allison. That's very inspiring. I think actually one of the questions was like, what's the most radical use of AI you think can entirely change how the nonprofit sector works? Which I think is that, it's like reinventing fundraising. You're putting these processes, these tools in place to build, like, have the, as in guardrails, but also the journey for those people to have a great experience. And then the time that's freed up is for those
Yeah.
conversations, those
Exactly.
the empathy, right?
That's where the dividend of time comes in, right? But you can't do it, Jonathan, if everybody is working 60 hours a week to generate those shitty, spammy fundraising emails, right? That don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And working 60 hours a week doesn't work either, you know?
Yeah.
And I said on the flip side of what Allison beautifully laid out for a vision for fundraising is, putting it within the organization. Let's not burn people out. Let's not work these 60-hour, 70-hour days and exhaust people and force our staff to go cry in the closet because they're so overwhelmed and so exhausted. I mean, AI can really help us. It can be a stepping stone to this, right? But as we've talked about, helping with some tasks, taking over some of the grunt work, but it's not going to work. The tool itself is not going to do it. What's going to do it is really empathetic and human leadership that is going to look at adoption of this tool really to reinvent and rehumanize the nonprofit workplace. And I think that would be the most radical out of the box application.
Yep. Girl.
Yeah. I like that. It's like the best way to make use of artificial intelligence is to use human intelligence and put that at the forefront.
Right. It's our chance to really rethink what it means to be human. I know that's not the answer people want. People want the quick fix, the magic bullet, the magic wand, the spell books, but this is our opportunity. This is our Promethean moment, if we will, right? Let's not lose it.
It's so brilliant. And Jonathan, think about that. We have an opportunity writ large to do exactly what Beth is saying right now, to be more human, right? And the challenge is up to people and organizations out there of, do you have the courage to take a good hard look at everything that you're doing now and throw the crap away, right? Throw it away and get to the heart, the essence of what we're trying to do. And I can assure you, I have never met a nonprofit NGO whose work isn't deeply human. That's what we're in the business of doing. And yet we've spent the last several decades making the work less and less human-centered.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I'm not going to build on that. That's so great. Do we have the courage, right? Also the courage to change. Okay. If AI can take away all those cut and pasting aerobics from spreadsheets, and all this grunt work, do we have the courage to say, okay, let's stop doing that. Let's get rid of all these hollow processes that are just wasting our time, that are just busy work, and really move it to the heart and soul of what we do in the nonprofit sector and do best, and what people got into the sector to do. We didn't get into the sector to cut and paste or to laboriously spend to try to write something when we're not good writers, to give us a first draft or to edit something down to 500 words that's going to take us hours when ChatGPT can do a few minutes. But then, okay, what do we do with those few hours, right? Can we repurpose those into, improving well-being? Can we repurpose those into being, having better relationships with donors? Can we repurpose that into really caring and spending that more face time with the people we're serving? That's where we need to go.
Beautiful.
I couldn't say better. I'm loving the riffing. This is very inspiring, and I totally agree. I think with everything you're saying about this being this opportunity, and you can rethink. And it takes some, courage, and it often takes this. I hate to use the word paradigm shift, but like a big seismic change in how things are for you to then really look back and go, actually, is the way we're doing things the most effective way now? We have a new capabilities that allow us to do things, and I think I guess the interesting point there is, with the new capabilities, you need to think, what are the problems we're already trying to solve, and can those new capabilities help us, rather than what can we do with the new capabilities? That needs to be the
exactly
kind of
right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. What are we trying to do here, Jonathan? And I would extend that to the board, right? Always look at the board first. What questions are boards asking? So back to fundraising, right? Boards are asking, how much money has come in the door right now? Boards are not asking, how are we making donors feel more joyful and connected, and what's our donor retention rate, right? Which one do you want to be in this next phase? And that is why this is so deeply a leadership challenge.
Yeah, it's really, yeah, that's very true. So we have, I found another question in the chat around, we've talked about equity a lot, and how often equity in the context of the AI tools, and whether their training data was truly diverse or representative of underrepresented kind of types of organizations and people. So we have one question, like how, I'll ask you, Allison. So how can AI work in the question here, underdeveloped countries like Nigeria, where I'm living, particularly in rural areas? And we've had a similar question in some of our past bridge sessions. I think in Venezuela, ChatGPT was banned. In Italy, ChatGPT was banned for a while, but has now been unbanned. So what happens if you can't even access, or how do you get access to the technology in those scenarios?
I have no idea. Beth, do you know?
I was thinking about when I saw that in the chat, there are a couple of organizations that have been working on this. NetHope has done a lot of work in different countries in Africa, and bringing this technology to those that are missing out or are being, and doing it equitably. They have been mostly experimenting with responsibly developed chatbots to provide information, for example, on maternal health was one of the models, or to providing information to farmers on planting and so forth. And I just saw, actually, the Gates Foundation has just issued a grand challenge to do just this, to bring AI into countries that don't have access to it. So it's an equitable artificial intelligence AI use, and I know the guidelines are kind of dense here, but it's something that you don't have to necessarily have a whole concept thought out, but maybe just an idea, and maybe not even have the tech there, and maybe it's worth checking into. I think actually, let's see if it's closed. It might have already closed, but I would watch what comes out from this, because there'll be a lot of learning on different use cases.
And now you know, Jonathan, why we're partners.
The other place I would also look at is Google did an AI challenge for nonprofits back right before the pandemic. You'll have to Google it. I wrote it up on my blog, and the thing that was most interesting was not the ones that won the challenge were amazing, yes, but they asked for many ideas, and they got several thousand, and then they did an analysis of different potential use cases across, and they related it to the development goals. And it's sort of basically a dictionary of potential use cases in rural areas and in international development. So I would go track down that study and take a look at that for some inspiration.
Thank you, Beth. That is really, really helpful. And I think, again, something we see in our program is that, we've worked with over 2,000 organizations from over 80 countries, and the access to technology, even fundraising tech, is not always the same in different countries around the world. And so it's great to, I think there's more awareness of that now. And I think actually there is a difference with this AI kind of rollout that was perhaps different to social media, is that we're more conscious of the harms it can do than when social media became new and exciting. We're all like, jumping on the bandwagon, but seeing as this amazing opportunity to talk with supporters and donors.
Right.
So conscious of time, we have a few minutes left. Maybe if we can, I will do a one last poll. If I can find the right button here, and
maybe your bot can.
Maybe your bot. You see, that's no good having a bot that kind of sounds like me and is sounds a little bit American, but is not as efficient as a real person. So I guess whilst we're waiting for people to take this, like Allison, I'll come to you. What are some of the kind of key takeaways you'd like people to take from this conversation and act afterwards?
So we want people to lean in, not lean out when it comes to AI. And we want people to be careful and thoughtful about it. And most of all, I think, Jonathan, we want people to understand that this is not just a technology issue. This is really a future of your organization issue. What do you want people to do in your organization? How can you be more human? How can you help people to be more joyful in their work and more renewed, not burned out? And how can you engage with outside constituencies in ways that are meaningful and build strong relationships with them? That's the opportunity that's here, but only if you're not scared off by the tech, only if you are planful and careful with it.
Thank you very much, Allison. So same question to you, Beth. Like, what are some of those, again, key takeaways people can go and enact after this?
Allison, what Allison said was so beautiful. I was just listening to it and thinking, and it made me happy, but, and it also made me think about, I was trained as a classical flutist. And the first time I played Beethoven's Third Symphony, there is a beautiful flute solo at the beginning. And when we were in rehearsal, I missed a beat and came in a beat late. And the conductor stopped, right? And of course I was sort of embarrassed. And he pointed to me and he said, "Coraggio," which in Italian is courage. So I'd say we need to have the courage to change, which means all the things that Allison said about adopting in a very human-centered way, understanding what the risks are, not be scared of it, don't hide, don't hide, don't be in denial about it, and look to a more joyful future, but authentically knowing, that it's not just all going to be roses. We know that from the past wave of digital tech and social media, but though there are some thorns there, but if we're thoughtful about it, we can mitigate the harm caused by those thorns. So coraggio.
Beautiful.
Right. Coraggio. So we've learned some Italian as well today. So just sharing the results of that kind of last poll at the end. So 90% understand how they use AI in their work, which is great. Again, 90% think it will really help in their work and plan to use AI in their work. So I guess we've ended up with a kind of quite a positive note of like, these are the things we can do. And we hopefully have addressed some of the concerns from the second poll around, lots of people concerned about those ethics. People were, to recap, it was like 70% were unsure if it was right for a nonprofit to use AI, and 92% were concerned about the ethical considerations. So a big kind of concern, and I think this has been consistent in kind of a lot of the webinars and sessions we've had with various different groups of organizations around, there's this big kind of concern, and there's this big excitement, and there's this big acceptance that it's going to be really helpful. And hopefully I think in our conversation today, we've managed to round that circle and give everyone on the call some insights. I think I certainly have learned a lot myself from what are those things you can be doing as an organization, and staying human-centered, looking at this as a human problem, looking at this as a leadership challenge, thinking and being thoughtful about your use of AI, and that will then help them and stand all these organizations in good stead and meet this amazing dream, Allison, that you have kind of shared with us today. So Allison and Beth, thank you so much for your time and wisdom and expertise today. I really look forward to the launch of the Allison Beth bot. That's half and half. I know that would be very useful for all of us to have as someone we could ask questions to in our day-to-day lives.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope that was useful for you, and look out for more webinars soon from the team at Lightful on our socials and on our blog. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you all soon. Thank you so much.